Hi again. As you probably realize, there are a lot of problems and challenges in online tutoring or online learning. As you probably have already experienced, online students are undisciplined. They are internationalized, they sit anywhere in the world. You have different time zones. You have varying commitment. Some are very eager, others are not that eager. You have heterogeneous groups with gender. We have different ages, very different experiences. So the challenge for the online tutor is to make progress at a pace suitable for the majority or preferably all. And the challenge is avoid losing those less eager to participate. As you, of course, realize, you cannot yell if you get angry or impatient. You cannot yell to your students, or you cannot speak softly and comforting to your online students either. So you have to compensate in some way for the lack of social cues and rich communication present in a face-to-face setting. Collaboration online is not intuitive, if you thought that. To negotiate meaning, socialize, collaborate in virtual rooms, you have to kind of build that virtual environment. It doesn't come there automatically. So challenge is make online learning a social and pleasant experience. How do you do that? And we also see very quickly that infrequent onloggers get lost. Some people will always find out that, oh, we have to go out sailing or out fishing, or maybe got sick, or somebody else in the family gets sick, and I need to go to a wedding, if not my own, and my children are sick, and there are always excuses for not logging in. And then after 3 or 4 days, these students come back to the virtual classroom and everybody has moved on, and then this person has to run and catch up. And of course, this is a bit annoying to the peers. Why couldn't you be here before? So you have to kind of build in this patience to ensure flexibility. You have to allow for these things, and that means you have to actually plan for it when you make the course. So challenge is make students participate and contribute frequently in a good spirit of collaboration. Now, traditionally, students want to be taught. There is, just a kind of a joke, but it is a point to it. There is a conspiracy between teacher and the taught, the students, to ensure processes are free of unpredictability and stress. We want to allow for openness and multiple contending voices, but the students don't really like it. The students prefer straight answers. What's the answer? The correct one, the one that I'm supposed to come up with for the exam. And that's what they ask for. And at this level, you don't give it, because that only correct answer is not there. So, of course, you have to expect students that they don't actively seek out processes that place more responsibility upon them for their own learning. They want to make life easy for themselves. So the challenge is move tutors away from the traditional explicative, transmissive, and banking modes of working, because that's what the teachers also prefer. Make life easy. But life, in reality isn't easy. It's complex. So we have to go over to work more on away from the facilitative methods where we just make things easy for people, and then we have to be able to explain why this is necessary in easily understandable ways. Typically for very many students is in the discussion forums. They come with these lengthy messages. And just think for yourself. You have been on Facebook now and then, and you don't really like very lengthy messages there. And if you go to Twitter, you're not allowed to have more than, how much is it? Kind of maybe 90 words or something. So try to avoid the lengthy messages in the discussion forum, and avoid this write it all and get it done, and discussions is a waste. Then this course actually is not for you. So what you have to avoid, that's the copy and paste work. That's a typical beginner online student. Go to Google, find some sources, copy a page or two, and paste it in. That doesn't work. So you need to be able to use your own words in essay writing and support your arguments with sources. The typical beginner comes with all this lengthy copy and paste stuff and no source. So the challenge is convince participants that an online discussion environment, and elsewhere as well, of course, less is more. Less is more. Cut it down. Use less words. You have to use short, to-the-point messages. You communicate better, and you have more impact. The student is supposed to become an independent and self-reliant learner. But you shall also ensure that this student is trained in relying on others to learn. Learn how to learn. To have success in this, to have success in personal and for the group, this depends on that each person work together to complete the task. It's the group that completes the task, not the individual. So the challenge, of course, is how to develop a good online community of practice in a multicultural and global virtual room. You are supposed to pace the course. As the online tutor, you give time frames for your activities, and you give clear cutoff dates. You need to put in time frames, otherwise you will not get the students to work together. They will just disappear in all kinds of directions and use different times to do the same task. So cutoff dates are important. This is fairly much contrary to the tradition and contrary to the academic liberty. So the challenge is calculate the correct time needed for the different learning activities. You have to balance the amount of content with the time needed for group discussions, and the ECTS hours that we have in this course, how many of them are available for this task. And of course, distance students tend to feel isolated unless you really work on avoiding that. So the voice tone, facial expression, body language is missing to a large extent in the online virtual room. Collaborative learning requires openness, warmth, and empathy. You have to build that in. And how in the world do you build social presence? How do you ensure that the tutor is actually perceived as a real person who engages in the learner's needs and progress? How do you ensure that peers are perceived as real? So the challenge is develop personal and social presence and build a social environment online. E-learning should be near and personal, not distance. So let's not call it distant learning, let's call it near learning. So we have to go from information gathering to information literacy. That is one of these processes in this 5-step ladder that Gilly Salmon describes. First of all, when we start out, we just gather information, copy and paste, and here it is. But then the next step is you need to be critical. Go through it, use what you know about information literacy. So then you go from information literacy to critical thinking yourself. And then from that to being creative. Give creative contributions. You will very quickly find out that unless you are very creative, your peer students will come up with the idea that you have been thinking of already. You're too late. So this of being creative, that's challenging. So the information literacy is you need to be able to search relevant, valid, and reliable information and critically assess it. So in this process, the critical stage is, can I use this information to solve a problem or apply it in the task at hand? If not, forget it. This means you have to assess the information you get. And also, you have to accept critical comments from the peers. Is this piece of information really relevant and good enough to be used in our common document or project? Remember, the group gets the grade for their product. It's not the individual. And then the creative stage. Think new. Challenge. Move upwards in the Bloom's hierarchy of knowledge and make the new knowledge count. How do we make pedagogy transformative and make learning go beyond the classroom? And then, of course, we have the assessments, the tests, the exams. Most teachers don't really like that. You know, they're focused on their subject, the content, and then, whoops, we have to make an exam. And then, traditionally, you have the end of grade test, the only thing that counts. How do we make assessment an effective part of the learning activities? How do we assess what we value? How can we apply what we know works well to make a best possible learning environment? And the tests are a very, very important part of that. Let's have a look at this pyramid. What works? When do you really learn? So if you look at the top of the pyramid, the lecture, well, maybe you remember 5 or 10%, unless you are a very, very clever lecturer. So if you make the students read as well, maybe they learn a bit more. And if you can add in video audio materials, that's what we're doing here, maybe you can remember even a bit more than that. But then you don't really learn very much before you're active yourself. So looking at the demonstration can be efficient, but learning the cognitive processes don't really start until you have a discussion group, you start negotiate meaning. And then, of course, the most efficient is you have to teach yourself. So a teacher always learn. You learn as long as you have students. So the students should actually accept that to learn, you're actually better off if you start teaching your peers. Just to summarize, engage teachers with broad and deep subject knowledge combined with pedagogical skills. That's a requirement for a good learning environment. And then the next step is make clear, concrete, and challenging learning goals set at an appropriate level. The third point is build a well-structured, rich, and varied learning environment with emphasis on cooperative learning with plenty of feedback opportunities. The fourth point, try to make clear progress plans with time frames and cutoff dates. The fifth point, try to be more learning-centered, more than teacher-centered. It's always better to be learning-centered because then you ensure you have the cognitive activities, and that's necessary for learning. Number 6, The students have to be trained to attribute success or failure to factors such as effort rather than ability. If you put in more efforts, you will get better results. The 7th point is a learning environment should ensure that errors are welcome. The traditional educational system all over the world is mistakes are terrible, errors, you shouldn't do those. And if you go a bit back to my grandfather, if you did a mistake, you risked a whip over your fingers or even on your back. Well, errors are welcome. That's a nice place to start if you want to learn something. You learn from your mistakes. And the 8th point is appropriate use of technology. Technology as such in itself is not enough for learning. You have to put it into a pedagogical context and use the pedagogy appropriately together with the technology.